Hello, welcome to AMT 3. I don't know what the hell this is. 314.
314 something.
It's something. All right. Here we go. Did you enjoy your break from me? See, everybody asked how. Don't be so emphatic about it. Damn.
You gotta use words we can understand.
She got very excited about gave herself a brain injury, nodding her head that she enjoyed her break from me. Huh? What?
All jokes, it's just jokes.
Yeah, that's what she said.
She has her fingers crossed by the back.
I know. Fine, you go back to crying yourself to sleep. I don't care. All right, we're going to talk about carburetors. This is going to be a lot of information. So I guess we should, get going. So before we can really talk about carburetors and why they do what they do and how they work, we have to talk about, the fact that we're putting them on an airplane, which is different than having it on a car. Because cars, pretty much don't change altitude like airplanes do. What's the highest road in the United States go up to?
14,000.
14,000?
It's pretty high.
Well, that's higher than most 150s ever see. So
Highway 88.
Highway 88.
It's not the highest.
Around
It
here.
is pretty high.
Donner Summit's like 6,000-7,000.
6,000-7,000, yeah. And, for kind of to contrast that, or a lot of people are told in their flight training in Cessna 150s and stuff like that, do not even touch the red knob. That leans it out. Don't touch the red knob if you're below 5,000. If you touch the red knob and you're below 5,000 feet, likely the engine will just eject itself out of the front in a wing depart light. Everybody's going to die. So, there are people out there who won't even lean an aircraft until they get over 5,000 feet. So, personally, I lean my aircraft as soon as I level off. When I fly over here from Lodi, I level off 1,500 feet. Man, I'm on that red knob leaning out. So, but it won't kill you. But anyway, so Donner Summit, 6,000 feet. A lot of people I say they wouldn't even lean their airplane out at that, but. We talk about getting to higher altitude. Well, there's a lot of reasons why you want to lean your aircraft out. We'll talk about all that stuff. So, all right, but we have to talk about the atmosphere. So we'll go like this, see how this works out. So atmosphere, A-T-M-O-S-P-H-E-R-E. A atmosphere. Well, this should be a nice review because I think Phil covered all of this, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, standard day.
59 degrees.
15 Celsius. 14.
Standard day is
59 degrees. Fahrenheit.
how many inches of mercury?
29.2. Yeah.
29.92 inches of mercury. How many inches of water is that?
A lot.
30 feet.
3 feet.
33 feet.
He said inches.
It's close to almost the same thing in feet. Very close. Close enough that you guys about 30 feet. What does that even mean? I mean, inches of mercury. How did they get that? How did they arrive at this?
It's the tube, they put some mercury in it, and then they put an atmosphere, pushes down on the mercury, and it goes up to 229.9.
All right. So there's a story that I heard when I was in AMP school. Don't know how true it is. I forget the guy's name. Wait a minute. Pascal. Because I always forget. I wrote it down. Pascal. Huh? So I don't know if this is true. But Pascal, he's trying to figure out this atmospheric condition stuff. So what you do is, I'm sure you went to Walmart, and you got a little kiddie pool, and filled it full of water, kiddie pool, and then you put a tube. You got to fill the tube up full of water, right? So you get a little ladder, and fills it up full of water. You put your hand over it, turn it around, and you kind of figured out that this tube has to be about 30-some feet tall. It's sealed up here. And the water found a certain level. This so happened to be about, on a standard day, about 30 to 33 feet. And so that was kind of cool. Pascal could be this guy. So here's Pascal. Not to scale, because that would be making very tall there. But anyway, so he's kind of hard to see that up there. So he makes a little chicken, a little rooster, carves up a little rooster. He had a little rooster carved up, chicken or something, and little floaty duck, whack whack. And so now when he puts the little floaty duck up there, he can see the duck and the water level. Well, the problem is, what happens as a storm's coming in? What happens to our atmospheric pressure? Does it go up or down? It goes down, atmospheric pressure. So if atmospheric pressure, and the atmospheric pressure is pressing down on this water right here, and we have a higher pressure, it presses on that water, which causes it to go up the column, right? And so when a high pressure area moves in, we know we're going to have sunshine, like we probably have a high pressure area right now, right? Sunny and everything's fine. The rain starts coming in, we have a low pressure. So low pressure, the water's going to do what?
Go down.
Go down. And then high pressure, when it's nice and sunny out, it's going to go up. So it just so happened that by happenstance, the little chicken, so he can figure this out, Pascal, that when the chicken comes in the house, a low pressure is coming in and the chicken comes in the house. And on a nice sunny day, the chicken would go, or the little duck would go back outside the house. So they accused him of being a witch, and I think they eventually burned him at the stake for this. But I don't know if that's true. But the rest of that story's true.
Wait a minute.
What's that?
She's all believing this.
It could be true. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it's not. Everything but the water and the thing and okay, I told you I heard this story. So anyway, so that's how we get this inches of water, inches of mercury. Well, we do the same thing on a smaller scale with inches of mercury. Get a little tub, put a little tube that would be about how tall? A little more than 30 inches, and with a little tub, and then the atmospheric pressure presses down on it, goes up and down. Okay. So 29.92 inches of mercury, which works out to be how many psi?
14.69.
We'll round to 14.7. Thank you for being psi. Now, I often will say 30 inches because it's faster to say 30. It's 2 syllables, 29. That's a bunch of syllables. So if I can say 30, I can save time and...
SeaWorld.
Thank you. See? You didn't miss me. All right.
Damn. I was the only one.
All right. So 29.92 inches of mercury or 14.7 psi. Let's see. What kind of psi is that?
Absolute.
Absolute. What does that mean? Absolute.
That's absolute.
Absolutely.
Standard.
What's different between just PSI-A and PSI-G? Right? Because there's PSI-A. I think I've done this before. PSI-A, which is what?
Absolute.
Absolute. Okay. Well, and then PSI-G is gauge. So we talk about absolute, that means it's the absence of pressure would be 0. But when we talk about PSI-G, like how much air is in your tires?
No.
Some of you, not very many. The little yellow light is on. Right, so yeah, like 40-some PSI in your tires.
Yeah.
Okay, well, does that 40 PSI more than the 14?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to confuse things now. When we talk about absolute, like right now, it's without talking in absolute, we would say this is like a 0 pressure environment. But we say absolute really is 14 PSI on us. See, that's kind of the difference what I was trying to get to. PSI gauge is what it shows on the gauge.
PSID.
PSI what?
D.
Oh, it's PSID.
Difference between the two.
Difference between the two. PE PSI? Well, if you spell it different.
Pepsi.
That's just Pepsi. A delicious sugary drink for some of you. Okay. All right. Let's see. 29.92, 14 PSI. What temperature?
59 degrees.
59 degrees Fahrenheit or
30.
15 degrees Celsius. Where?
Sea
Sea
level.
level.
Where at sea level?
San Francisco.
Don't laugh.
On an average day.
Right there. Which happens to be right about
San Francisco.
right along the 40-degree north. So, yeah. Perfectly dry. perfectly dry at latitude 40 degrees north. So, all right. Well, what happens when we go up in altitude? Would you say we go higher? He is absolutely correct. We go higher. When we go up in altitude, we get higher. People are writing this down. Say that again. Altitude. Altitude. An increase in altitude causes pressure to
Decrease.
So what does that mean? Molecules we have to deal with. They're spaced further apart. There's less of them. So why do airplanes fly high? Why do they go way up in the air?
Drag.
Less drag. There's less molecules up there, so less drag. Trim out the engine to fly up there, less drag on the airframe. It's less power, but trim it out, less fuel. That was a concept that was kind of hit me in a weird way because I'd been flying aircraft with fixed pitch propellers for so long. And when we talk about props, you'd be like, well, that's weird. There's a lot more to know about them than you would ever have thought. But flying a fixed pitch prop, they're only efficient in an extremely narrow range of operation of forward speed and RPM. We'll talk about why at a point. But when I got an airplane with a constant speed prop and I was going somewhere and somebody, I talked to the CFI, he's like, well, first rule is go high, go fast. I'm like, what now? He's like, dude, you got a constant speed prop, man. Get up there. Go up high. The airplane's going to perform better, going to get more speed. You use way less gas. Ooh, that's a good thing. So, all right, let's see. 1, 2, pressure lapse rate. That's how much it changes. It is about 1 inch of mercury, Hg, per 1,000 feet. So if we have 30 inches of mercury right now and we go up 1,000 feet, we're going to have 29. Go up another 1,000 feet, we'll have 28. And since we're going to talk a lot about engine management, that's the word I wanted to say. Engine management, we need to start talking about stuff like this, and you kind of get used to what happens with the engine. Again, with the fixed pitch propeller on an engine, this stuff just kind of escapes right by you. But when you start flying stuff with constant speed, then you get to actually start seeing how this stuff interacts. Because a fixed pitch propellered engine rarely has a manifold pressure gauge, but a constant speed will always have a manifold pressure gauge. So you take off around here, and you can see that at wide open throttle, you're going to have just about an inch less than whatever atmospheric is. So if atmospheric is 30 that day, I'm going to see about 29 inches wide open throttle on the manifold. Start my climb out, got 29 inches, leave it wide open throttle. I get up 1,000 feet, I've got 28, then 27, then 26, and it's just going to keep dropping as you go up. Let's see. Not only are we going to have let's see, increase in altitude, we'll have a decrease in pressure, but as we go up, we will also have a decrease in temp. And this is what I like about this. I told you the pressure lapse rate in feet, feet, and decrease in temp. So what is it? The temperature lapse rate.
2 degrees Celsius.
The temp lapse rate is, say it again,
2 degrees Celsius.
2 degrees Celsius per
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet. Or, and nobody remembers this, I don't, and I'm somebody, so 2 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000. So I find the easiest way to deal with this 2 degrees, with the conversion between Celsius and Fahrenheit while you're flying, is to get 2 different temperature gauges. Tell one to be Fahrenheit, one to be Celsius. So I have both. So I'm really good at converting. I'll just figure out, it's 46 degrees up here, and that's whatever it's Celsius. Like, how do you convert it so fast? I'm like, well, that one says Fahrenheit and that one says Celsius. I'm really good at math. I don't know. All right, so as we go up, as we just talked about in air, the effectiveness the effectiveness, or we can call it density, which would be a better word. Density air is reduced. So the air just doesn't work as well as it should. The funny thing is, though, in all of our fuel metering systems, for the most part, they just can't sense that. We'll get into one that does do a little more mass airflow, but for the most part, it doesn't really sense that there's been this loss of air molecules coming through. So carburetors tend to be a little stupid, and once they're programmed, for the most part, they just dump fuel in, and you get up in altitude. As you go up in altitude, it just keeps dumping the same amount of fuel in. Like, whoa, hey, we got way too much fuel for the air we got, and it's like, oh, what do you want me to do? So that's why, as pilots, we have to manage that, or not. I mean. Let's see. I threw in some altitude stuff here. Altitudes. Yeah, we'll do this. Actual. What's the actual altitude?
Absolute.
Actual measured altitude above what? Sea level. It's always going to be sea. What kind of sea level? High tide or low tide? Meaning? Middle. I don't know. I consider actual whatever it is. I don't know. If I'm on a 6-foot ladder, it's altitude 6 feet. But, you may hear the term AGL. What is that? Above ground level. AGL. So distance measured above ground. That becomes important. It's really important as a pilot. You know, if you're at 5,000 feet flying along above sea level, but the mountain in front of you is 7,000 feet, that matters. But as mechanics, why do we care about any of this stuff? Well, because we have to know how the engine's going to perform. We have to be able to answer questions, troubleshoot engines. You know, if a pilot comes in and says something like, every time, you know, my airplane works great here, but every time I get to my destination, I mean, it's like no power, it doesn't work well, I don't know what to do. Well, what's your altitude? Well, it's 0. I mean, I'm on the ground. I'm like, yeah, but what airport? Well, Tahoe! Okay, well, yeah, sure, you're 0 AGL on both spots, but it's the same, right? Pressure altitude. What's my pressure altitude? We could ask Captain in the back.
Pressure altitude.
I mean to put you on the spot.
Altimeter set to 2992 on a standard day. It's a standard.
Just want to make sure I had it right. So you take your altimeter. So in the aircraft, we have altimeters, and we have to constantly adjust it. So there's a little knob right here. It doesn't show up too well. Called the Colesman knob. And this is called the Colesman window. We'll get that in a second here. And so what you do is before you take off, right, we'll listen to the broadcast, the little weather AWOS. AWOS. I was going to say ATIS, but it's not. It's AWOS, right?
Well, it depends on the airport.
It depends on the airport. It's just, don't worry about it. It's just differences between broadcasting systems. But ATIS, Automated Terminal Information System. AWOS, Automated Weather Observation System. All right. It's a recorded message. So before you leave here, I don't know what the heck it is here.
You might find an ASOS around too.
Oh boy. So you just listen to the recorded message, right? They're going to tell you, wind is such and such, at a certain degree, and the temperature is this, the dew point's that, and visibility is this, and oh, by the way, altimeter is 2991 if we looked at that one. And it wouldn't be, because if it was 2991, my altitude right now is 940 feet. That says 940 feet. So they tell you what the altimeter setting is, And so I dial that in my little window, and if I'm right here, right now, and everything is right, they're right, and my airplane's right, and I dial in the little thing, then this little hand right here should be at 0, and this little one should go at about 75. Why? I'm at 75 feet above sea level. I don't want to say 0, right? Because we're not at 0 here. So they will tell you the altimeter setting, and we're going to adjust that on our altimeter. But the term pressure altitude is what you get. The pressure altitude is the altitude, A-L-T-I-T-U, altitude read on an altimeter. Oops, I forgot. I'm recording. I can't write in that little box. Altimeter when set to 29.92. So you set that and you get your pressure altitude. Well, and then we have density altitude, and I'll tell you what it means. Density altitude is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. That is what the airplane feels, what the aircraft and engine feels based on humidity, temp, and pressure. So it is really common around here in the middle of summer, they might say altimeter is 2.9 or 9 or 2. Caution, density altitude 2,500 feet. What does that mean?
Effectively 2,000 feet.
Effectively, the airplane's going to think it's already at 2,500 feet, not based on pressure, but corrected for humidity and temperature because it's really hot. So as it heats up, the air molecules are also going to expand out and act like it is an altitude. So when they say it's density altitude, as a pilot or mechanic, you have to think, okay, this engine is going to act like it's already at altitude. Be careful. The airframe is going to act like, so we're going to have a loss of power because if we have a loss of air going into the engine and loss of performance out of the aircraft because you don't have the molecules going over the wings. You have some, it's not enough. So that's, people get into trouble around here. 172s at Tahoe and 4 people.
Oh yeah, not taking off because it's hot.
Yeah.
It'll take off.
Even Cameron Park.
Oh yeah, you're not getting back though.
What's that?
You get airborne, you just won't fly.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I don't want to.
The trees don't shrink either.
Yeah, Columbia's another one that happens to people. So these mountain altitudes, they'll get you. So, all right, let's see. So what was I going to say? Yeah, I already said that. So, yeah, they tell you on a little ATIS or AWAS, whatever. They warn you. Density altitude. It's higher than what you think. Don't act like you're at 75 feet around here. It's also not uncommon. I came in here the other day and it said density altitude negative 500 feet. So what does that tell you?
500 feet below sea level.
Yeah. So great performance, right? Took off really fast, climbed really well. It's nice. Yeah. So as air density is reduced, so is power. Do we have any Back to the Future fans? What was her name? You are my density.
Leah Thompson?
Is that her name? What was the character's name?
Mom.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
McFly, he wanted to impress the whatever, so. It was
Impress his
Elaine,
mom.
it was Elaine, wasn't it? It was like Elaine. Noreen? Something. You are my density. So anyway, that should get yours. For every 10 degrees Fahrenheit increase in over standard day, the engine will lose about 1% power. So says Lycoming. So if you had a 100-degree increase in power, I had a customer many, many years ago, had a Funk. A Funk is like a 1940s vintage tail-wheeled airplane, high wing. You should call it mid-wing because the wing's about that tall. Dope and fabric, wood, all wood spar, wood wings. And he was coming back from, I believe it was Oshkosh, with him and his buddy and all of their stuff for the week in the back of the airplane. It's a 2-seat airplane. And the owner, he was 6'5", and not a skinny guy. I mean, he's just he's your size, right? How tall are you?
6'4".
Yeah, he's a little bigger than Brian here. And his buddy wasn't nearly that tall, but much wider. And this airplane has an O200 in it, and they were coming back, and they stopped off. And so Oshkosh is in summer, right? Mm-hmm. So it's summer. I believe they were through New Mexico, Arizona area, took off from an airport. You can take off, but you can't climb. And as the terrain slowly started coming up, and there's a mesa, he gets to the mesa and is like, wow, this isn't going to work out. I'll just pull. So he pulled up, stalled out, came down, and his words, I turned that wing into a bag of sticks because it's a fabric. So, yeah, that density altitude got him. So we had figured out at the time, like his O200 was producing like 60-some horsepower at best. These two big guys in the airplane. They both survived it, but one of them I don't think ever made it out of the hospital. It just started him spiraling, the health problems, and I don't think he made it out of the hospital. No, it got him. All right, so now we know about air, right? Okay. And air is very important because fuel needs air to burn. Without the air, fuel doesn't do you any good. Thinking about that. You don't believe me? Try and light a match under gasoline. I mean, get a 5-gallon bucket of gasoline, put a match down the gasoline, try and light. It won't light. You gotta have air. Mm-hmm. Do it about that far above the gas. Just try that.
If it's really cold, you'll be all right.
Recording, you better say you're joking.
No, I'm not joking. I did. I got to keep the stories to a minimum. I blew up some stuff. When I was in the Navy, I taught firefighting.
You can't say that and not tell us.
It wasn't bad. Just I lost an eyebrow. When I was in the Navy, I taught firefighting school, and what we would do, and this is funny because this is in Treasure Island, San Francisco. So back when I was, you would often see these black plumes of smoke, from the skyline, which is funny now because it's such, the liberal city, and here we are making black smoke all day over here. This beautiful skyline, which isn't good. So anyway, what we would do is we would take a 5-gallon thing and we would fill it full of diesel, and then light the diesel on fire, and it would sit there and burn all day for a couple hours, and we'd have these ladles, and you take them and you throw them out across the, again, flaming diesel out, in the middle of the bay, and then we would teach students how to use firefighting equipment to put out this fire. But you can't light diesel on fire that way. So you can get a 5-gallon bucket of diesel and you can try lighting it on fire all day. It's not going to light. So to light it, you put just a little thin film of gas on top. Well, it was my first day doing it, and then I didn't know how much gas to put on. I was by myself, so I put on more than enough. And when I lit it, whoosh!
Like at the air show?
So, the first thing you do is, I hope nobody notices. All right. Fuel.
Having one eyebrow out of race.
What's that?
It's having one eyebrow out of rags.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Shave the other one off. Otherwise, you walk around like this all day. All right, talk about some terms here, and you have to understand these terms, and you have to understand fuel when you're working on really any aircraft, because again, it comes down to troubleshooting, understanding what's going on, why you want to do certain things, why you don't want to do certain things. One of the terms is volatility, with an O, not an A. V-O-L-A-T-I-L-I-T. Volatility. Some of you have a volatile personality. No, actually, nobody does in here. All right, that is the gasolines. From here on out, I can write just gas, right? Tendency to vaporize. You got to have your fuel vaporizing. You can't have it liquid. It's got to turn into a gaseous state. So the gas has to be gas. And so it's important that it does that. If you have a fuel that doesn't want to vaporize, then it isn't going to start the aircraft. Our car gas is pretty volatile. It's a lot more volatile than aviation fuel. You think, well, isn't that good or bad? Well, I think it's good. Which makes aviation fuel a little bit harder to start an engine on because it's not as volatile, so it doesn't turn into its gaseous state quite as easily. But it also means, thankfully, because it's so expensive, it doesn't evaporate out of the tank as fast. So, volatility is important because liquids and solids don't burn. I'm not sure how true this is. Only vapors burn. And you gotta think about it, like, well, wait a minute, wood burns. Then I read this one time, and I'm watching wood burn. I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's the vapor above the wood burns. So the wood gets hot, gives off a vapor, and that's what burns.
Wood's not liquid.
It's not, but the vapors do. Did I say liquid?
Well, it says liquid on the board.
I know.
And
solids too.
Liquids and solids. Liquids and solids don't burn. Only vapors burn.
It's the solids.
Huh?
I didn't see the solids.
I know. Maybe it's because I wrote it. All right. So you want it to vaporize to burn. However, if it is too volatile, then the fuel will boil. Creating air pockets. Known as vapor lock. Or you will lose fuel through vents. So vapor lock's a big deal. You can actually get fuel in fuel lines to start boiling, and it will create a bubble. Well, the bubble is going to run backwards. So we need the fuel to go this way down into the engine. But if you run it past a hot spot, maybe too close to an exhaust, and it vaporizes and turns to a bubble, which way does the air want to go? Back this way. So you can actually get in a situation where you can vapor lock, where you get no fuel going this way, only backwards. And so what's the engine do at that point? It dies. So what are some of the things that can, I was going to say, I should really have this in here, but I'll just tell you, and then I'll look down and I'm like, oh no, it's actually the next thing. Let's see. All right, too volatile. We got to do this. If not volatile enough, then, oops, can't write there. Fuel will not vaporize and won't work. So you got useless fuel. So that's not going to work. So good volatility. Good volatility will be enough to start a cold engine. But not so volatile to boil in the lines. What temperature does water boil?
212 Fahrenheit.
212 Fahrenheit where?
Sea level.
Sea level on a standard day?
Yeah.
Yeah. What temperature can water boil at?
Lots of different temperatures.
How much pressure? Or how little pressure?
Yeah.
Get it down to 0.
Yeah, it'll boil, right? So, I don't know. At one point I was teaching something in the second year, refrigeration. And so I brought in a jar of water and hooked some things up to it. And I hooked up a vacuum pump, and we just put a vacuum on top of the water, and it starts boiling right there, you know, at 72 degrees. So it'll boil. So we don't want that. Let me see. So vapor lock. So my vapor lock. This is tied in. So yeah, so fuel can boil in the line at any temperature. I don't want to say that.
Depending on the pressure.
Depends on the pressure, yes.
Yeah.
Which is what we're tied to. All right, vapor lock, a condition that occurs when fuel vapor, well, when fuel turns to vapor in the fuel system. Not the carburetor or fuel control unit. Caused by low pressure. Where do we find low pressure?
High altitude.
High altitude. Heat. Where do we get heat?
The engine.
Sun.
Exhaust.
The sun. That's why airplanes have cowlings on it, because the sun would beat down on it, and so cowling in front of the engine is really just a sunshade to keep everything from boiling. Heat running through the engine compartment. It's rather warm up there. How hot is an exhaust system?
1,400.
Yeah, at least 1,400 degrees. So your exhaust is going to be stacks close to the cylinders on the outside are going to be 1,000. No. Sharp bends and fuel lines. Sharp bends in fuel lines. So fuel lines, you want to keep the sharp bends out of it, gradual bends. There's not much you can do about any of this except for the pressure. Now, I have a gravity feed system because I have a carburetor, so there's nothing I can do about pressure in mine, but you have fuel injection. So you have a anti-vapor switch. You can't use it too much. Yeah, I guess you can use low setting, right? Yeah, low. And you'll find out why. So he's got a Continental fuel injection system. So it has a boost pump and an engine-driven pump. So the boost pump is in the tank. You turn that on, it will pressurize the fuel line, increasing the pressure, which decreases the likelihood of vapor lock.
Yeah.
Problem with the Continental fuel injection system, which you're going to find out, the electric pump can override the main pump, which can override the fuel control system, which can flood the engine. So, yeah. But they give you two settings, high and low. So, got to know which one to use. All right, latent heat evaporation, L-A-T-E, and latent heat of vaporization. Well, it's just a very fancy way of saying definition. The amount of heat necessary to vaporize a given amount of fuel. So based on that statement, what does fuel need to vaporize? Needs heat. Where does it get the heat? Let's talk about simple carburetors. You guys, most of you have a carburetor sitting on your bench right now.
Carb heat.
Where does it get the heat?
Atmosphere.
Atmosphere.
That makes sense, yeah.
Atmosphere. That's all. What else? Like the metal of the carburetor. So the metal surrounding the carburetor and the intake system. So in a little while, you guys are going to be running that little ground power unit. It's got a tube about that long, comes out, goes down. It's just exposed steel, and there's a plate, and you're going to mount the carburetor, so you got that much intake. And you're going to see, and it's going to be funny because I'll be like, whoa, man, check that out. You'll be like, expecting to be hot. It's just ice cold. It is ice cold and dripping and from the condensation around it, so it gets really, really cold. Why is it cold? Because the heat needed to vaporize the fuel is coming off of these metal parts. So what does that mean? Carburetor's giving off heat to vaporize the fuel. Carburetor gets very, very cold. Moisture in the air, you're going to get icing. You get icing in a carburetor. Outside a carburetor is not a problem. You get icing on the inside of the carburetor, which is what happens. Then you're going to start closing off the throat. You need a visual. Can you just grab him by the throat? Right? Starts closing that off, and pretty soon you have no air going into the engine. No air going in the engine means you have no fuel going into the engine. So that's why all carbureted aircraft have carburetor heaters. So it's just an alternate source of air. It's the same air that you would use to heat the cabin. You just have air ducts around on the outside of an exhaust system, not in the inside because that'd be deadly. And it comes, hot air will go up. You have turn it on, pull a cable, flapper valve goes, hot air. I'll show you this a little bit later. Goes up in the carburetor and heats the carburetor up. The air going through, which would melt ice. And we've talked about this, right? Yeah, because what happens is you're flying along. If you have a fixed pitch propeller, RPM just starts going. So you be this way. Starts going lower and lower and lower. Like, what's going on here? Well, what do you got?
Icing.
Carburetor icing, starting to close it off. So what do? Oh, pull the carb heat. Pull the carb heat on. What's going to happen? It's going to get really worse. You turn that back off.
Then you pull halfway.
Sorry, I wasn't recording. I would have said something right there.
Worse before it gets better.
So yeah, it gets worse. Now you got to open it up. It's going to get worse. Why did it get worse?
Because you enriched it.
Because you made it really rich. Because the air density went way down because you introduced really hot air, and
Getting rid of the ice.
you're putting water into the ice and water into the engine now. It really hates that. So the ice and water leave, and then pretty soon it's
Back to normal.
not back to normal. It's better. Then you push it in, it's back to normal. On a constant speed prop, you won't see the RPM decrease because the propeller will hold it at that RPM. But you'll start seeing manifold pressure drop. So manifold pressure goes down and down. So yeah, recently I had one of my customers declared an in-flight emergency. Look around, nobody here was in that airplane. Declared an in-flight emergency and landed at an airport and called me, and just horrific panic, you know. The engine you work on, man, damn near killed us, and this and that. And it was they were flying in instrument conditions. It was in and out of clouds, so it's very humid and cold and just the right conditions for carburetor ice and so I'm thinking it's probably carb ice. Did you apply carb heat? Yes. Did it help? No. Wow, this sounds pretty serious. Then you start thinking it through and you call back. When did you apply carb heat? Well, after we were established in a glide path and had reduced throttle. Okay. So you sort of turned off the thing that makes the heat, that melts the stuff. And how did it work when you got on the ground? Fine. So I called Phil. I was like, oh, God. It's carb heat, man. Put the carb heat on. No. Carb carb heat works. I was flying with a person one time, a customer. When I used to fly with customers. I fly with you. A couple people here I fly with. But yeah, we were flying it, and it was one of those days we were staying clear, just clear of the clouds in Livermore. So it was a bit of a high altitude. It was pretty much an IFR day, but just VFR enough to do it once around the pattern. Come in for a landing, and he pulled back the power, and no carb heat, and I saw the cowling start to ice over. I'm like, you gonna pull on the carb heat? My instructor said not to worry about it. Like, hey, how about you just do it for me today, okay? Just to be all right, let's see. 1, 2, let me see. So fuel, that was the whole point. Fuel needs heat to vaporize. Let's see. Heat comes from metal parts. Metal parts of the carburetor. It's going to get very cold. Let me see. Enough heat is extracted to cause carburetor ice. I'll just abbreviate it. So if you're not familiar as a pilot and you fly carbureted aircraft, you're always supposed to put on carburetor heat when you reduce the power for landing. That is the most likely time that you will get carburetor ice, because you're pulling the manifold pressure back, you're closing the throttle, manifold pressure is going to go into a vacuum, and you're more likely to get ice at that point. You can get ice, they say, up to 100 degrees outside. Okay, take a break.